All right, so we're recording now. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. It's been a while since we've talked.
Yeah, how long has it been? Because I really lose track of time. To me, the difference between a week ago and 2 months ago is really vague and confusing.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly either, but I think it was before the beginning of the summer.
Oh,
Um,
wow, that long.
yeah, so it's been a while.
And so how's everything been going for you?
I think everything's been going pretty well. I seem to be going through a lot of changes, especially recently. But yeah, I sort of really took seriously or started to try and take seriously the idea of being honest as your highest value or one of your highest values. And it's really been working out, um, which is I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but it's like that in combination with not having any serious expectations about outcomes is actually quite good at reducing stress.
Yeah, and I get what you mean about how, like, from a certain perspective, you can see definitely how taking sort of a vow of honesty leads to good results. But it's counterintuitive to many people's way of thinking
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it feels like the option to lie gives you so much more freedom.
Right,
Like
right.
the choice to lie whenever I want to, it opens up so many other paths.
Hmm.
So I think, and especially because like you're new to doing this, so your experience with it will be very different than mine. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
talk about it a lot, but I'd love to hear more about your experience with that, sort of what you expected and in what ways it was different or counterintuitive.
Hmm. Yeah, so I think in particular what I've noticed is that I've found it easier to initiate um, trying new things that I've been thinking about trying for a while, but have had hesitations, maybe because of uh, like nobody I know is interested in these sorts of things. So there's a couple examples that I have. So um, the first one is that, so there's a C.G. Jung Institute in the city that I live in.
Oh, cool.
And for they run like a 6-week program starting in September about Jungian dream interpretation and basically teaching you how to do this. And I learned about it a while ago, but I was sort of hesitant in part because of like, oh, if my friends find out that I'm going to like learn how to interpret dreams, they're gonna think I'm a weirdo or something, just because it's not something that many people take seriously. But so that's like one thing that I'm looking forward to doing. Um, and then another one is that I actually started about 4 weeks ago going to services at a local Orthodox church.
Cool.
And yeah, I've just been like really honest and open with the people there about um, that I'm trying to figure out what I believe, and they're just like really cool and accepting about it. And like they have like no expectations about like for anybody who's just there visiting. So that's really, really nice. And it's it feels like all my interactions with those people because of that are very authentic and that they actually care about like who I am as a person and what I'm trying to go through and figure out. And they're very interested in it. And so it's like, it's really nice.
That's really beautiful. That's fantastic. Yeah, and I think some people who aren't sure about their feelings on religion, and definitely are people who haven't been to church or not for a long time, the stuff that gets on the media, the weird shit of extremists and sort
Yeah,
of protesters creates an image where you think that you have to go in, you have to go in and pretend.
right,
Where
right.
as the reality I've found is most actual churches, like local churches,
Mhm.
are just completely accepting of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and absolutely, if you'd gone in there wearing a mask, then if people liked you, all you know is they like that mask.
right,
They
right.
don't know that they like your real face. That's
Mhm.
all you can possibly know. And it's only when you force yourself to just reveal who you are that, and like, yeah, there's the increased danger of being genuinely rejected. It's like it
Sure, sure.
requires more courage to do it because the rejection would be more real. but it's the only way you can get real acceptance and
Mm-hmm.
feel like, wow, these people actually like me for who I am.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah. And it was kind of funny because they like the third week I was there, there's a coffee hour afterwards, and so I had been going to that and just chatting with people. And because I had been there 3 weeks in a row at that point, two people actually decided to buy me books from the bookstore at the church, and which was like really surprising to me. And but like really touching because that's not something that you would really expect. Um, but it seems as though they're just genuinely interested in talking to somebody who is new at this sort of thing and interested in learning about what they're doing. So,
Yeah, and because the same way that you feel like that benefit of them wanting you there, it's nice to be wanted. The
sure.
same for them. You're showing them that other people want what they're doing.
Right,
Like,
right.
you're making them feel wanted as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah. So, yeah. So still getting used to that. I found that it definitely requires you to be better about communicating things to other people. um, but I mean, I guess that's maybe to be expected when you start to take that seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also when you really take that telling the truth thing seriously, it can start with just what you say, but then it also leads to what you do. Like you said, it seems like you had to be more honest with yourself about the things you want to do
Mm-hmm.
and about the reasons you're not doing it. And when you face that more honestly, you feel sort of forced by yourself to do
Yeah.
things that you know you should be doing.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much it controls our behavior when we allow ourselves to repeat lies in our heads.
Yeah, for sure.
And
um,
so, has there been any downside or any problems? Have you encountered any real difficulty with sticking to the truth? Like any times where from social pressure you found you did lie or anything like that? Or are you falling into it pretty easily?
I think, at least right now, I'm falling into it for the most part pretty easily. There have been occasional like little hiccups in.
And unless I'm misremembering, it's like all of those things are the things you were wanting to work on in our very first call. It seems.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that we had discussed that you were working on that hasn't gone well? Or, like, as far as from what I can remember, it sounds like you're just doing really good with everything.
Yeah, I think, maybe there's other things that I haven't really thought that much about because the things that we did talk about had been weighing so heavily on my mind and I'm paying so much attention to them. But yeah, it's sort of, I guess now that that's out of the way, things are at least feeling a lot better. So,
Fantastic.
yeah. Um, and so there's another thing I wanted to mention that I did as well, which was I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned that I wanted to go on a short, I guess, like nature retreat or whatever for a few
Yep.
days. And so I was able to rent a cabin for 4 nights, and it was on this plot of land, about 60 acres of woods with a river running through it. And so I spent 5 days and 4 nights just like completely alone in the very quiet wilderness. And it was, yeah, it was really great. And I understand why people become monks.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely something that I need to do regularly. Not sure how often, but something definitely regularly that I should do.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I remember you saying that, and it seems like you really followed through on everything. Like sometimes you talk to people and they've got, like you, 3 or 4 things they want to work on. You
Mm-hmm.
talk to them a year later and it's the exact same thing. It's, oh, I thought about it for a while, but this just falling back in patterns.
Yeah.
So how did you motivate yourself to make the change? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and because I'm also not being flattering here.
Sure.
Like, yes, I like you and whatnot, but I'm not being flattering at all. I'm honestly surprised. It's like, just on
Yeah,
every single thing. You moved forward on it. You didn't fall back into an easy pattern. Was
yeah.
it hard to motivate yourself?
A lot of it came down to once I really started taking seriously that what I want and what I like to do and what I want to explore actually matters. Then I started pursuing those things, and you know, like the case of the Orthodox Church, you meet people, and then because you meet good people who seem to genuinely care about you and your situation and what you have to say, um, it just sort of snowballs and makes things more and more positive for you. And um, yeah, and like there's other things like I was teaching for part of the summer and stuff, so there were some things where um, I made sure, or I knew that I had to take seriously, and so and be like very diligent and do good work with, because I don't want to do a shitty job teaching a summer course, right? And so that kind of bleeds into other things that you're doing as well. I found, I guess, and I also felt like I did a pretty good job of when, and I still feel like I do a good job or a better job doing this when I am feeling in a shitty mood, like almost no matter what I'm doing, if I can, I will just like go outside and just like sit for maybe an hour or something, whatever, you know, just sit and let my emotions kind of play themselves out, and really watch them and try and not to engage with them in a way that will make them more intense or last longer or anything like that. And I found that that was really helpful. The just also the allowing yourself to be in a shitty mood is really helpful. And that you know, it's okay if you're not going to be productive while you're in this shitty mood, because you can be productive later, I guess.
Yeah, that's fucking beautiful. I love that. Because that's something that's so hard for so many people, especially like people with the more intense emotional problems you have. As soon as you get upset, it's not okay. You push against it, but then also you allow that mood to dictate your thoughts of what you're going to do next. And you behave in such a way as to exaggerate it while resisting it at the same time. And often, like with some people that I've worked with like more on a regular basis, it's like reminding them that, hey, once you're not okay, you stop the list of chores for the day. And you deal with the fact that you're not okay. Then you deal with the next thing on the list. You don't leave, I'm not okay, till after 6 more hours of errands. But it's incredibly hard for people to do it. Like you can tell someone over and over again because you get so caught up by the emotion that the hardest step is that noticing it the way you've done.
Yeah, but I think also one thing that made it a little bit easier was that because of the nature of teaching a course for the summer, there isn't like a set time where I have to be doing work. Like I could sort of shift things around so that if I wanted to take an hour to just, or whatever, to not do work for a little bit, I could always do the work later that night or something, or the next morning, and that would be fine. So I think that
not everyone has that freedom.
Yeah.
There are people who are stuck with certain hours, and like even if they're having a mental problem, they can't take a break. Or there's also various categories of things to do.
Sure.
You know, if a child needs something, if there's something immediate, or like, oh, well, I'm upset, so I'm not going to go put that fire out. There are times where you just have to fucking do it. But it's great that, it's great that you've got that freedom. That your life circumstance is lining up with the way you want to be.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was actually just going to say something about the retreat. So what was your question?
My question was going to be, I'd like to hear more about the retreat, your time in nature.
Yeah. So I mentioned there was a river running through the woods that I was at. And so for the 3 full days that I was there, pretty much each day each night I probably got like 12 hours of sleep. I don't usually get that much sleep, but I made sure that I wouldn't like force myself to get up in any particular hour. So, I'd go to bed when it got dark, so like 9:30, and then I'd wake up at 10 o'clock or something the next day.
That feels nice though, doesn't it?
Yeah,
To
for
just
sure.
sleep and get up. And yeah, like I'm lucky with my disability and like the fact that my wife's the primary caregiver. Like it's only a couple times a year that I've set an alarm like at all.
Yeah.
And it's just related to the channel. Occasionally I've set an alarm to be up for some call. But other than that, I just let myself sleep. And especially with bipolar, it's amazing fucking difference that, like, for me, it's to go to living by an alarm clock that, especially that doesn't match my natural rhythm, I just fucking break down. But I think for anyone, and yeah, that's what vacation should be. So many people have vacations where they schedule so much that they come home feeling tired. To me, like, just the power of just letting yourself sleep is amazing.
Yeah. I guess maybe one thing that I started doing before I went on the retreat. So one of the books that somebody at the Orthodox Church bought me was a daily prayer book. And so I started making a habit out of each morning before I ate breakfast, I would say whatever morning prayers were in the book. And I think I've noticed that especially on the retreat, had a really interesting effect on how, like, even if you just said the prayers and like hardly paid attention, the way it sort of oriented your focus or your mind throughout the day, it was a noticeable difference for me. I found that I got distracted by various, like, even before the retreat, I found that I got distracted a lot less from the things that I wanted to do during the day or wanted to get done. And so I continued to do that throughout the retreat. And so, yeah, I'd usually wake up, eat breakfast after saying, the morning prayers or whatever. And then I would walk to, or just kind of meander down to the river and spend a few hours just like sitting on the rocks there, just listening to, I don't know, birds or whatever, just like not doing anything really, except just hanging out. And I also attempted to meditate as I was down there, or I guess mostly just be mindful, just like be aware of where my thoughts are going, and or pay attention to the breath. And some emotional things would come up and I'd sort of work through it. And then on the morning of the third day, the third full day that I was there, I was, trying to be mindful or meditate in my cabin. And then I had I think I sort of got the idea about how to go about this from John Vervaeke's lectures, where he was talking about insight. Because he was talking about the process of like paying attention to your senses. In other words, the things that you look through to interact with the world. And then what I tried to do was pay attention to my breath, and then also include in my listening, and then also my sight and other sensations. And then finally my thoughts. And so I was able to, and I don't think I've ever done this before, I was able to get to a place where I was able to be aware of all of that happening at the same time. And it was just like, it was like listening to a symphony. It was just this incredibly beautiful, like, awareness or experience.
Did you find your thoughts, like that you were having less thoughts as you were paying attention to more of the pure input? Was that train of thoughts that you were in a different state being very mindful of, were those quieter or were those still going on?
The thoughts were still there, but they were a lot less frantic and shifting all over the place. And I think, if you're sort of just doing nothing but sitting for a couple of days, I'm sure that tends to happen. When you're not, and additionally, there's no pressure to actually get anything done if you're just sort of completely relaxed and allowing yourself to enjoy what you're doing, even if it's just hanging out in the woods. at least in my experience, it tends to slow things down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then something really that was unexpected also happened after that. So after I was in that state for a little bit, I'm not sure exactly how long, but then I decided to start getting going with my day, making breakfast and then going down to the river. And I was really, really overcome with this really sad emotion, and I just started to cry. And the emotion was something like how, like, I can't believe that I forgot that life could be, or that life is just the beauty and meaning of life is right in front of you the entire time, but you didn't see it because you were too preoccupied with all your problems that are actually not that big of a deal.
Holy shit, you're making incredible progress. Like that level of insight for your first time going out doing it for a couple days is amazing.
Yeah, and like when as I think back on the experience of when I was really mindful, it was like seeing the beauty and the meaning during that experience was like a remembering of it. It wasn't like oh, this is the first time this is something I didn't know could happen. It was like, oh, I remember that this is like part of how you truly experience a meaningful life. And so like, yeah, I was just overcome with, I guess, like the tragedy of the fact that both I had been completely missing that, and the fact that so many people go through their entire lives without experiencing something like that.
Yeah, I'll also sometimes get that intense sadness when I've achieved a great state that I can't share it with anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I want to share it with my wife, with my kids, but I know there's nothing I can do to share that moment with them. And explaining it is meaningless to somebody else who hasn't had it.
Yeah.
It's just you can't paint it. You can't write a song about it.
Right.
And it's so sad to not be able to give that to people.
Yeah.
Think about someone you really love or the people who are really suffering.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like and I haven't really talked to anybody else about it yet, precisely because it's like I don't know what I'm gonna say that's gonna convince them that this wasn't just me like having a good time, that it was just a lot more, I guess, serious for me than that.
Do you find like when you were doing that practice of like increasing your senses, like what you were paying attention to, that it's almost like you're unlocking features in a game, that there's like so much more inside of you than we're ever aware of, and that it's like, holy shit, I could spend months alone forming variations of this, and like wait, I didn't realize my mind could do that. It's like finding a new feature on something, and it's what else do I not know is in there, that there's this vast world inside, like as if in all that fiction where it's like Fantasia or Fantastic or whatever, like it's a real place.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like this stuff is so real. It sounds so poetically bullshit.
Yeah.
Experienced it, but it feels so fucking real in it's like an interior physicality.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the insight that I was that made me understand, like, oh, this is why people go and meditate in caves for like 15 years in a row and don't talk to anybody. It's because of exploring things like that.
Yeah, like you're actually doing something.
Yeah. And what's really interesting also is that, like, because of that, there is a value, or there's a genuine value to not doing anything that's like outwardly productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, value requires meaning. And from the perspective that sort of corporate society takes, that definition of productive may not line up with why we're here. Like, we weren't produced by Pepsi.
Right, right.
Like the corporations didn't design us. We designed that. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's, like even Peterson says, it's not really clear what's more fundamental, like
Right.
consciousness, information. And we tend to begin to treat ourselves like some accident and like consciousness as if it's not real. But
Right.
if the development with consciousness, I can see very easily that the development of consciousness could be the reason for all of this.
Right, right.
Like all the physical, all the obviously productive things, the only reason to do any of that, the only reason the universe began at all, may be like, it's just as reasonable as the idea that it came out of nowhere.
Right, right.
For no reason at all. I find it's like deeply logical that consciousness may be the purpose, because other than consciousness, there is no purpose.
Yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah.
So why wouldn't the purpose be for the benefit of consciousness?
Yeah, yeah.
Because time and space itself, the laws of physics, don't care about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we attach? But so, how long ago was it that you took your time in the woods? Like, how long has it been?
It's been, so I actually went last week. It was this past Tuesday up until Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, I was starting to feel also by the way you were talking about it that it hadn't been very long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't forget it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, it's easy to get busy. And, okay, here's the other thing. Things are going better for you.
Mm-hmm.
When things are going better, it's easy to forget all of this stuff.
Right, right, yeah.
And yeah, like, I don't know if you saw, I think it was last time me and Ryan talked, like I said, how with the apple and like suffering coming along with the knowledge of good and evil, that from what I can tell, it's like suffering is the catalyst that advances consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So notice, you would not have done any of this work if you hadn't been suffering.
Right, yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
So suffering pushed you up a level. And like that, or that saying that hard times make strong men make good times make weak men. You can do that just to yourself.
Right, right, yeah.
So it was a certain amount of suffering that pushed you to needing to look deeper into reality.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look deeper and you're able to create a better life.
Right, right.
Then you can forget what you had to look into and just enjoy what you're doing.
Right, right.
And you'd be surprised how far some people can slide. Like, no, it doesn't happen all at once.
Right.
But that eventually, and like you said, you want to repeat it again.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you don't forget it before you repeat it again. And
yeah, yeah.
And even just you can create a ritual out of just that moment. Like, if you pick one of those special moments there and you, like, just on a regular basis, meditate on it. And like, you can add something else where you match a certain sound effect, like you put on rain sounds, or you match a certain smell. You just take a whiff of a certain oil and spend 5 minutes meditating on that experience to like carry it forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
We have a tendency to forget things that we don't continue to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I've one thing that I've noticed is that before I had this experience, I actually found it more difficult to motivate myself to try and meditate each day. But ever since that experience, even though I haven't been able to exactly reproduce the same level of intensity and beauty, I found it a lot easier to just feel like I want to just sit and meditate and pay attention to my breath or something. Like even if like all I notice is that I'm breathing or that I have a pain in my back or something, like I still have a very, like I still have a stronger desire to do that than I did before. Which is I guess new and interesting as well.
Yeah, and that's, it's kind of like when you're learning a lot of things. Like if you're trying to learn how to ride a bike, at first it's a lot of pain and
Yeah.
embarrassment, especially like something you have trouble with.
Yeah.
But then you reach that point where now suddenly it's easy and fun, and you
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
be on the bike all the time. I find it's the same thing with meditation. For some people, it's a real chore and it's difficult, especially if they have a lot of garbage inside to clean up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then once you learn how to do it, yeah, it's kind of like riding a bike also, the way you can't explain the difference between before you knew how and after.
Hmm.
You can't describe it, you can just show it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's hard to describe the difference between meditating before and after you sort of learn to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it can become intensely fun. I find even for me, I go in and out of phases. I go through time periods where I won't meditate for weeks or maybe even a month or two at a time, or where I do now and then because I'm noticing I'm carrying stress and I should, and where even though I can, it's just kind of I'm not in the mood to. And then I'll go through time periods, especially sometimes in the winter, where I want to be meditating like 6-8 hours a day. I'll meditate 2 hours at a time. And then, sort of like check in with my wife, do this or that, sit down, do another 2 hours.
Yeah.
Just sort of, I can go back and forth.
Yeah. So something you said is related to a question that I've been thinking about. So I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I've been seeing a therapist for almost a year, I think. And she told me something which I guess I had already known for a while, but she told me that I am truly, in a Freudian sense, a neurotic. And that, I guess Jordan Peterson associates that with, I guess, higher levels of negative emotion. And when you were talking about, in your discussion with Ryan, how suffering brings about higher levels of consciousness, that sort of triggered something for me, because one question I had is, what could possibly be the evolutionary benefit of high neuroticism, especially in a man who doesn't give birth and rear young children, right? And it seems to me that if you're more likely to experience negative emotion, then that is a characteristic that will force you to develop, like you said, maybe higher levels of or deeper levels of consciousness. And I've been wondering if maybe that is the evolutionary benefit of something like high trait neuroticism.
Yeah, I really like that train of thinking. And to me, it's very similar to like the book Shamans Among Us, where he was suggesting that schizophrenia may be to create shaman.
Right.
Like, on the same scale, that simply, like what Peterson had a lot of problems with depression over his life. Clearly for him, it pushed him. But yeah, absolutely. A lot, perhaps all of our mental illnesses are in fact things to push us to develop new skills.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that they're all essentially dangerous gifts.
Right.
That if you don't know what to do with them, they will destroy you. But if you do, you do the right thing with it, just like fire.
Yeah.
Control, it destroys everything. Under control, it's the beginning of the technology that puts shit in space. Yeah, and I'd spend a lot of time thinking about the extreme end, the bipolar and the schizophrenic, like involving the psychosis level. Because I do think, again, also properly managed, it seems to me that psychosis might be actual connection. The problem being that you don't want to say that in such a way that somebody with psychosis expects it all to be understood correctly. Assume getting it all wrong, and that you need to learn how to, not just everything that jumps into your head is something. But you're right, I think even just the neuroticism, the increased depression and anxiety may be just a opportunity to push your consciousness further. But our society really, like the advertising department of humanity, is very much running a sort of magical practice. Advertising is like our mass manipulation, and we could be using that to our own benefit. Like the way at one point, everything that is now advertising, events, music, famous figures, all of that was for the sake of moral grounding. It was tied into either culture strongly or tied into religion, and it was being used actively to like shape the community, like even shamanism.
Right.
It's essentially that advertising. You're drawing the buffalo on the wall, and you're doing it in a different way. You add music and dance, and you alter everyone's consciousness, and then you alter the reality of society. But at the moment, that wing, the people that we've let take that over, use it to those natural pains, those opportunities. Instead of saying, okay, that's something great you have, take that within yourself and, do something fantastic with it. Instead, it's, no, that's not good at all. And you need a bigger car, or you need this medication, or you need to go to Aruba, or you need a fucking beer. And they capitalize on it to make you consume something you don't need whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
And most people, did you notice? Well, yeah, just something I noticed. You get away into nature like that, and then you think about the average, or the idea of the average person, and it's so much of what they're worried about is completely made up.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, that was definitely certainly part of the insight I had.
yeah, there's so much nonsense.
Yeah.
And as much as I understand that the economy serves like a purpose and that it's a machine that does do things that benefit us, it does so many ridiculous things as well that you get caught up in thinking are realistic. But when you take a bit of time away, society starts looking more alien.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly interesting.
Were there any points during your retreat, like those were all some fantastic high points? Were there any difficult times being alone? Was there any, especially, I don't know how much time you've had in nature and around animals, was there any fear at night? Or were there any moments of frustration, like, okay, this is now unpleasant, what am I doing out here?
Yeah, so definitely, I think for the first couple of days, I think the first 2 days, I was feeling mostly like I was kind of maybe anxious or antsy, like thinking, oh, I'll be when Saturday comes, I'll be glad to get out of here and be like get back to the city and like do things. I'll look forward to seeing friends or whatever. But then after those first couple of days, I started to really settle into it, and then I began to appreciate it and enjoy it more. And then as far as like things that happened when I was down by walking in the woods and down by the river, and also at night, I was very worried about potentially running into like a bear or some other animal. And maybe you remember that one live stream where I asked you the question about whether or not you're afraid of bears coming because you were in the middle of the woods streaming. I thought about that when I was on that retreat, because I just kept thinking, well, I mean, Mercury hangs out in the woods at night. Maybe I'll be fine.
Yeah, if all you have is black bears, and again, like I wouldn't mess around with a grizzly or some other kinds, but black bears I find are completely harmless. Like, well, not quite 100% completely, but it's an unusual circumstance that anyone's injured by them. They're really chill animals.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've tamed North America. Like, it's possible wildlife could have been more aggressive, but that we hunted out for hundreds of years, the most aggressive. So the same way that we've altered the genetics of, and like the behavior of the farm animals we've domesticated. I've never heard anyone talk about this, so I have no idea. It's just something I've thought of, but I've wondered if it's possible, if to a certain degree, we've selectively bred wildlife that we all killed the most aggressive of whatever. But it seems to me that North America's wildlife is pretty chill overall. It's not that dangerous.
Yeah.
And nothing's looking to eat people. Nothing's used to it. And we're not good eating either. We're particularly bony.
Yeah, but yeah, fortunately I didn't have any run-ins with any animals, but especially when I was down by the river, if I was just like, I would find that the place I would pick to sit would be like a rock in the middle of the river, because then I would know if a bear was like walking towards me like sooner, I guess, because it'd be easier to see or whatever. But
also, if you just make a little noise every now and then, bears will avoid us. So if you're really worried about it, because often if I go into the woods at night and stuff, I'm generally quiet. I want things to approach.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you're worried about that, you just make noise every now and then, and everything will avoid you.
Yeah. That's what I tried to do, and I guess it worked. Yeah. But yeah, as far as I mean, for the first couple of days, there were some like emotions that had come up about just various aspects of my life that I had been thinking about, and I guess tend to be themes when I get in more depressed moods. Because when they came up, I really tried to focus. I mean, because I didn't have anything else to do, I really tried to focus on just sort of allowing things to play out and not being afraid to allow the emotions to surface, I guess. And I think that was really good because that mostly happened on the first full day. And then after that, it was whenever the negative emotions came, it wasn't nearly as long or as intense.
Yeah, so you're saying the last time we talked was, what, 2 months ago?
Maybe 2 or 3, something like that. Yeah. I can't remember either, actually.
So let's say 3.
Okay.
I'm still surprised the progress you've made in 3 months. That's really amazing how far you've come with all of it. And how different do you feel from that person you were 3 months ago? Does that still feel like you, or does that feel like a yester me? Like, that's someone else.
Yeah, I think with each day it feels more and more like someone else, but I think certain aspects of what I'm doing are new enough, like like going to this Orthodox church or whatever, that still like these sort of new positive things on my life still feel like kind of the foreign aspect. And I think as time goes on, it'll be more and more familiar, and like these aspects of my life will feel more like part of me, I guess. I guess I'm still just kind of surprised that that these other newer things are like so positive for me. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so it sounds like with everything you've started, that with all of it, your intention is just to continue it, that it's all going well. So are there now that you've got all that going well, is there anything else that's a difficulty or that you still don't know what to do with? Or do you now feel like really motivated, that you feel you have a sort of full direction? Or is there any aspect you're still struggling with?
I think the aspect that I'm still struggling with, but I feel like I can now put more energy or thought and time into it, is sort of this existential question that I've been thinking about for a long time, that I think a lot of other younger people are thinking about, which is the question of God, and do I believe in God, and how do I understand what these like various religious traditions are saying when you hear the declarations of their faith, and that's actually part of the reason why I decided to try or visit the Orthodox Church, because from, I guess, a little bit of Peterson, but mostly John Vervaeke, what he was talking about as far as like the participatory aspect of whatever spiritual tradition you're a part of being very necessary. I found that as I was kind of going through this on my own, I didn't really have well, first of all, like a communal aspect, but like any sort of ritual or participatory aspect to what I was doing. And so I think that me figuring out this question about what do I believe in God, or how can I figure out how I can truthfully say I believe in God, what does that mean? I think a lot of that is in part, or I'm trying to explore what having these participatory aspects of a spiritual life will have on that question for me. And I think it's also really good because the people in the Orthodox Church are completely okay with discussing these things with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how are you coming along with that at the moment? And when you say you're trying to figure out God, are you doing it just sort of intellectually, like you're trying to understand ideas about God, or are you also trying to reach out and feel it, like the Gnostic idea, like the direct contact, like
Sure.
prayer, listening for an answer? Yeah.
Yeah, so at first, I think so I've always wanted to figure out how I could so maybe I should say it this way. I think in order to properly understand it from an intellectual perspective, you have to know and experience the participatory aspect of it as well. And I think because that's seems to be something that can also add meaning to life. It just seems like an important thing that I should at least explore at some point. Actually, I don't know if you saw Paul Vanderklay's conversation with Skip, the guy who has his YouTube channel about Carl Jung.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, anyways, in part of the discussion, he has a criticism of I guess Jordan Peterson's understanding of Carl Jung, and I mentioned this a little bit in the Discord, but that was really important for me because I feel like I'm hung up on the question of belief in God in the same way that Jordan Peterson is, which is why him talking about that was so, or like why I was really engaged in that part of his discussions, like with Sam Harris and his other lectures on it. And what Skip was saying is that Jordan Peterson is trying to come to a belief in God through logic or through logos, not necessarily logic, I guess, but like through the logos aspect of reality. But God exists in the eros. And what that means is that, and his analogy was if you're going to convince a 2-year-old that the stove is hot, the only way that you're going to do that is if the 2-year-old experiences the stove is hot by touching it with his hand or whatever. And the analogy is the only way you can actually be convinced in God and have a proper understanding of what God is to have an experience of God, a direct experience of God. And because of the ultimate transcendent nature of God, it's impossible to explain it it's even harder to explain to somebody than explaining a hot stove. And so I guess I'm still trying to work through that, but it seems like that conversation with Paul Vanderklay and Skip was really important for me. And I think it's going to help me a lot if I digest it more and work and just continue to work towards it. Towards understanding things. Yeah.
I agree with that idea totally. However, I don't think Peterson's actually missing that. I think he's touched the stove. He just doesn't discuss it anymore. He's had the direct experience, and perhaps it's because of the way it's so hard to walk around putting everyone's hand on the stove. He's trying to focus on just the logos side, but not because that's how he's trying to find God. He's touched the stove. And Grizz first pointed out the best clip. I'd seen some older stuff where he was a little more open about talking about weird stuff, but then Grizz posted the one. Did you ever see the one that Grizz talked about where the way Grizz worded it was that Peterson rejected the Holy Spirit?
Oh, no, I don't think I saw that. I'll have to go back and find it.
So it was I looked for it on my own and didn't find it. And then one day Grizz posted like a link directly to it. And it was an older Q&A, like before he'd taken off. And Peterson tells this story about, that meaning of music sculpture he did?
Yeah.
His symbol, like that's actually, he made it as a 3D sculpture. And it's like really large. He made it out of foam. And he said it was at the time period, I think, where he was working on it. And he had it in 4 sections that like mounted together because it was so big. And he said he had one section out and was like looking at it. And I think he even said he was playing that piece of music he uses in all his intros. And he said he was just looking at his artwork, listening to the music. And suddenly he said it was as if the top of my head disappeared. And like that he was aware his head was there, but it was as if it opened. And he said it was as if it was something like, instead of the top of his head, it was like this dome of clouds. And he had this intense experience of like that euphoric direct connection with God. And that as he was observing the own experience, like wondering even what it was, he thought, I couldn't function like this. Like, I can't go to the corner store in this state. I couldn't have a conversation. I couldn't. And he said that he sort of rejected it. Like that he said, I can't operate in the world like this. And it was as if he said to God, I like this, but I can't operate like this. Then he said that he's had the like milder versions of it repeat a few times. So he's had that. And so when he talks about how like he doesn't believe in God also, like I took a shot at recording a response video to his Do You Believe in God? But I realize now we never edited it and put it up. But it's like, to me, his whole argument there, it's like he does believe in God. He just doesn't seem to want to say it. Some points, like at one point he says how I'm not going to declare I believe in God as if it's some virtuous statement. What is that? Saying you're a good person? And like, he really punched that moment and got a big reaction from the crowd. But I think maybe it was the day before or in that same talk, one of the two, he tells the story of a rich man approaching Jesus and saying that Jesus is good. And Jesus says, don't call me good, only God is good. So those two things to me don't match. If you're saying, he says, what is that? Some virtuous statement?
Right.
Well, no. And what does it mean to say, don't call me good, only God is good? If you're saying, I don't believe in God, or I won't declare belief in God because only God is good. That makes no sense.
Right.
And I've heard him say it, I think more than once, like, if you really believed in God, you'd be a good person, just like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
You yourself, he talks so much about how much of what we do isn't under our own control.
Right.
Disciples, or he sees the profound point that Zizek made when he said that even Jesus had his moment of doubt. And so what do you expect from the rest of us? I totally don't buy his argument that a belief in God instantly makes you a good person.
Right.
Well, in fact, you could very much believe in God, but decide God's a fucking prick. Decide the point of reality is to fight against him. And your belief in God could, in fact, drive you to be evil, depending how you define God. But even if you define God as the ultimate good, which is like part of my definition, there is that ultimate good to it. That doesn't mean I fucking understand it.
Sure.
It means I'm looking for it. It means but yeah, and for me, it's not about, though, all of that like all that logos analysis of God is great. But no, none of that makes you like believe it, in that you'll continue to act it out when unobserved. The logos side will set up the societal pressure and will sometimes shape how you behave in front of others or when you think you might get caught. But to really affect your behavior all the time when you're alone, you have to have had you have to, like, believe it yourself the direct experience of God to a certain degree.
Right.
Before you'll take it seriously. But then no, that doesn't mean you're instantly a good person.
Sure.
I find it motivates you to try to be a good person.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah. So I guess I think maybe the main point for me was this, like, approaching it from a logos perspective, and not giving enough credence to or weight to the direct experience component of it, I guess. So yeah.
And when either in nature or in the church, are you having experiences that like feel like there is something there, that God is something, perhaps that we don't know what it is yet, but are you having some experience of it?
I think a little bit. I haven't had, I mean, if you consider that revelatory meditative experience an experience of God that I had in the woods, then yes.
I would consider that,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to define it for you.
Sure.
Because I could also see how, like, Sam Harris would not define that as an experience of God.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes what's something I found really interesting recently, and this started happening before I went to church or started going to the services at the Orthodox Church. I would notice that when I'm sort of lost in thought, that all of a sudden one of the thoughts that would come in my head would be like a piece of a prayer, or like a little piece of a saying that I remember from Mass from when I was young or something like that, which is something that I found really, really interesting. And yeah, so I guess one of the things that I've heard is that it's important to be open to these possible experiences, the possibility of the experience of God. And I think that's the part that I'm just learning to sort of open up to, in the sense of pushing away the sort of intellectual, maybe Sam Harris doubt about whether it's God or not. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that moment you had where you realized how beautiful everything always is.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the truth behind the saying, "The kingdom of God lies before men's eyes, yet they do not see."
Yeah.
Pick up a stone, and there I am. Split a piece of wood, and there I am. Like, to me, that's that you fully understand that now. Like,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That glory is everywhere, including in the dog turd on the sidewalk. That's like steps it. It's fucking everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm amazed. Like, the insights you've had, the changes you've made to your own behavior intentionally, the things you've overcome, and then to unlock that experience so quickly. Mm-hmm. Like, lots of people go on repeated retreats trying to get something like that and don't access it at all. Mm-hmm. You're fucking hitting the ground running with all this. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I will say that when I first got interested in meditation when Sam Harris's book Waking Up came out, like, I don't know, it was probably like, 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. I'm not sure exactly. And a few months after I'd just sort of started dabbling with meditation, I had a really intense experience that was similar to what I had in the woods. But then in between those two times, in that, I guess, 5 or 6 year period, I didn't really have much of any experience to speak of that was like anywhere close to that level. And I had tried meditation on and off. Like, there were times where I would meditate in the morning for an hour every day for like months straight or something, and I wouldn't get anywhere with it.
And what do you think was different? Like, what allowed you to access it, like, recently when it didn't work in the past?
I think it was really, or a huge part of it at least, was the fact that I had a couple days of just really actively trying to relax and like at various points trying to be mindful and taking it very seriously. I think the fact that I was sort of isolated in the woods for a little bit, for a brief period of time ahead of time, was had a serious effect on it, I guess.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you managed to fit that retreat in.
Yeah, me too, me too. Yeah, after before ahead of time, it's like, oh well, I got to spend money on a cabin and a car and food and all this other stuff, and I got to take time, like I have to make time to like not talk to anybody or get anything done for 5 days or whatever. This is going to be like a drag, and I'm pleasantly surprised that something actually came out of it.
It's fantastic. So you're looking forward to doing it again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be able to for a while because I don't make that much money as a grad student. But yeah, I definitely think it's something I want to try and figure out how to do regularly.
Fantastic. Yeah, are you going to want to wrap up soon, or do you have a fair amount of time?
I have a fair amount of time.
I could stick around too. If we aren't going to wrap up soon, though, I would go take a quick piss break and be back. So
Right.
Yeah. So if you want to take a break too for a minute, I'll meet you back here in just a couple of minutes. So what else is on your mind?
Let's see. There's another, this idea that I've been kind of thinking about, because I heard some people discuss it at the Orthodox Church, and it's I guess the question of why God would allow evil to exist in the world or something like that. And because of the way Carl Jung views consciousness, he thinks that the whole reason why evil exists is because once you become conscious of good or one aspect of nature, then it splits into polarities. And so everything necessarily exists in pairs of opposites, everything that we're conscious of, right? But Carl Jung has a criticism of the church's view on good and evil from a different angle, which is something like the following. The church says that evil is merely the lack of good in the world, or effectively something like that. Like evil, the only evil is not substantive or substantial in itself. It's only the lack of good. But good is something that is like actually there and everywhere, and God is good, right? But what Carl Jung's criticism of the church is that you shouldn't, because they've sort of demoted evil to this thing that is like only a result of some aspect of whether or not good is present. It maybe represses the shadow side of the collective aspects of religion. And so I think that's his criticism of the problem of good and evil. And I was wondering how you thought about that.
Well, I didn't think the church defined it that way. Like, to me, and maybe
I don't know if all branches of Christianity define it that way, but this is something that I read in a book about orthodoxy that I've been reading.
So I was raised Catholic, and so maybe different in an Orthodox church, but to me, the whole story, like Satan's real, that's not an absence, and that
right.
evil's a real force. Like even in the Our Father, there's protect us from evil.
Right.
In the, passed on by Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Christ casts out demons all the time. It's not that he says this man is empty. We must put something good in him. He says it's full of fucking demons. I'm going to put him in pigs. Like there's something there to move into the pigs and chase them off into the Sea of Galilee.
Sure.
So I heard something different from the church than Carl Jung did, but also, times and places, churches say different things.
Sure.
I would agree with him that the more productive way to think of good and evil is as two forces.
Right.
same as like the yin and the yang and everything. And that, yeah, like suffering is something. It's not just the lack of joy.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Own. That, yeah, I would agree. Evil's something on its own, because the lack of good is either something neutral and bland, or if you just lack good and lack evil, you're not there.
Yeah.
Maybe nothing is, or even nothing is something in a way. So yeah.
Yeah.
So to me, good and evil are both forces, and that the good, well, you usually don't even have to, good is working along with everything.
Right.
And the evil is the actively trying to make things worse. Like, we thought that, like, evil isn't suffering either. Like, there's suffering that is just a result of processes.
Right.
But then there's that maliciousness that I'm going to create suffering that it's not even for an ultimate process. Like, you know, someone might take a child and scar the entire body. It's a part of the process to make them a member of the tribe. And this is good for them in the long run. It's another thing to say, I just want to torture a child.
Right.
And so to me, yeah, the evil's an active force. And you can be destructive without being maliciously evil. You can be accidentally destructive. And yeah, that's how there's a difference between accidentally destructive and maliciously destructive. And to me, that's where the evil comes in. It's when you decide that whatever the fuck God is, because like the way I would answer the do you believe in God, like Peterson, I wouldn't want to just say yes to that, because I have no idea what the fuck someone else is talking about. Yeah. So I would want to define belief, and then I would say, and for me, God is whatever is there, and I don't know what it is. Like, I'm not saying God is this, this, and this. Like, God's something, but I don't know exactly what it is. And to turn against that intentionally is evil.
Right.
To wander away from it by accident can be painful and will involve suffering, but that's not evil. To accidentally move counter to God from a lack of understanding. It's when you feel you understand the situation and you intentionally are working against the good.
Right.
That's just the way I've seen it. And I do agree with, I've never heard that Carl Jung said this that I'm aware of, but yeah, I agree with him that it's like a fact of creating reality, perhaps. Like, is it a metaphysical law of physics? To have good, you must have evil. And the more intensely pleasurable heaven is, or the more intensely good, the more intensely terrible hell has to be. That's the way reality's made up. And in that way, ultimately, though, you could say everything's good, because ultimately all that evil is there to create the good. And especially if this is all being done on purpose and is good for consciousness, that we're moving to an end goal. And perhaps we only need to separate these for a time. Right. And then we can unite them and move, like, and have developed something in the process. That is the way I see it. The same way that you can't have outside the box without creating inside the box.
Right, yeah.
Outside is nothing if there's not inside, and inside is nothing if there's not outside.
Yeah.
It may be an actual sort of law of the reality of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so in that way, to me, that answers why a good God would allow evil to exist, because it's part of a good process.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think it's great. And then I think it's great to plug in Peterson's thing as well, what he says about you can't be a good person. If you're harmless.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have to discover your own monstrosity, then to control it is good. Yeah. I agree with that. And that's always from the perpetrator side of evil. Right. And I've never heard him say this, but I would also add another level, because then we've got the overall game, that evil's good for the overall. And we can see now how evil might be good for even the perpetrator.
Right.
Then you have to take into account the victim. And for me, forgiveness is an incredibly beautiful thing.
Right.
And like Peterson says about what we admire. If somebody's badly injured by someone else and they come out saying, hey, I forgive that person. I'm like, look at the problems they have. They didn't yeah, they're destructive. And yes, they tried to kill me and they're, deranged. I feel sympathy for them. I hope they get help. We admire that.
Yeah.
And the same way that the ability to do evil, learning how to manage it, creates something truly good. Suffering evil and learning how to manage that, I believe, creates something truly good as well.
Yeah.
And that would tie into another one of Christ's lines from the cross. The Father, forgive them, they know not what they do.
Right.
At least for me, that shines. Like, that's a beautiful line. That's like wonderful.
Yeah.
And it just shows that beauty of forgiveness. And so I find if you put that all together, I can see how there's some grand tapestry here that is beautiful. And to me, it requires that at the end of the game, everyone agreed it was beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
So the one thing from the church that I have the most trouble with is the idea of eternal damnation. Unless eternity is being defined differently. Because I can understand the concept of an eternal moment and that one moment of I can understand temporary eternities. The same way that Georg Cantor or whatever could understand multiple infinities. Limited infinite, yet obviously somehow limited to be. I can imagine that kind of thing with the word eternity. So it's something like that, where it's like the easiest way to understand the experience you're leading yourself to is to say it's an eternity of fire. But if it's actually that at the end of Revelation, a bunch of demons and the worst handful of us actually suffer for all of eternity, for the rest of us to enjoy the permanent land, then I have trouble with how that's good.
Yeah.
But
I've actually found thinking about the idea of eternal damnation so I remember in Tim Freak and Ken Wilber's discussion that Ryan filmed, that I think Ken Wilber was saying we usually think about eternity as just like a really, really, really long time, but really it means like timeless. So in a sense, or in an important sense, each moment is eternal. When you are in the right frame of mind, you can see that it's eternal. And so maybe I could understand or I could make sense of the eternal damnation if you sort of take that point of view of what eternity is.
Yeah, and that's a theme in the book Jerusalem that Riz has read, and I think Dan's reading it, and I've referenced it before. In fact, I think my last live stream I read, like the last full moon, I read from Jerusalem, and it was the demon explaining to the boy. The boy says something like, "What is life and death?" He's like, "Death is the illusion." And then he talks about everything being there eternally, and it's one of the themes of Jerusalem is that like every moment's eternal, the way like a book is. So there's that sense of, because once you do the truly evil act, also worse than any of the torture or punishment after is in fact for your benefit. That's hammering you back into shape. The worst part of it all is before you're repaired, is being that. Being the molester or the rapist or the, imagine the horror at waking up one day and you've gone so astray, you're Hitler. Like the worst part of that is the actually being that. And perhaps in some way, even the ideas of the Akashic record or lots of things, it's like, perhaps that's an eternal moment. And you've created that you're that forever. Also, though, if consciousness continues, which I assume it does, and I find it's counterproductive to assume otherwise, because there's no downside to assuming it continues that I can find. Worst case, I'm robbed of the opportunity to find out I was wrong. The only thing I'll lose is knowing I was wrong. And if it continues, I can imagine that if you work yourself into a really bad state, whether it's karma, reincarnate, like all kinds of systems, I can imagine that there are timeless places that you go that are very difficult. And yes, you move on from it. So it's not that kind of eternal damnation, but that perhaps nothing else describes it. But there's a fucking eternity in there. But that is like, at least from my understanding, that's like heretical talk. Like that's against, I
Yeah.
think, at least the Catholic Church. It's that, nope, that's the fucking story. Once after the final judgment, it's forever.
Yeah.
But again, and actually, do you care about more of a spoiler for Jerusalem?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so anyone who wants to read Jerusalem, jump ahead 5 minutes. So big spoiler with Jerusalem. Aside from all that talk of the timelessness, um, two characters at one point go to the end of time and go to the end of the whole thing. And what they encounter at the edge, it's sort of the veil of God, sort of, is Saint Michael and Asmodeus, the demon from the whole book, and like the worst demon, like fucking causes rape and murder, and they are both there again as angels. And you know, the two characters are shocked to see Asmodeus there. And they say something like, you're a builder, and he just sort of like laughs and like, yes, I was a builder, of course I'm back to my rightful place. And they, you know, they reference something to say, you know, what about all the things you've done? And it's, well, surely here at the end of time we can let bygones be bygones when there's nothing but bygones left. And that the idea is that this was all a drama, that this was all, and in fact, even when Alan Moore, actually, wait, I've got the book right here, so I'll show you one fantastic paragraph where it's the war in heaven. So there's one chapter that the whole chapter is just brilliant. It's written from the perspective of a statue of Saint Michael, but which contains Saint Michael, that he's in every image. And so there's one chapter entirely from Saint Michael's perspective, and he describes the fall, like where he drives down the demons. You know, like Saint Michael's the okay, yes. For anyone who's going to listen who doesn't know, because we're kind of talking as if everyone does, when Lucifer, you know, raised the rebellion against God, God assigned Saint Michael to be the like the head of the heavenly army. So Saint Michael, like the lead. So this is Saint Michael talking about the fall. Here am I become a soldier at the fall, my staff made slippery with the ichors of the fallen, as we drive them down into the low geometries, into the hells of substance and sensation, torture mazes of the intellect, maelstroms of bile and longing. We are loving them and weeping as we run them through and tread them under out of mathematical necessity. The 32nd spirit, who is mighty, drags himself towards me down the Q shaft that impales him, coughing up a blood of logarithms. Rape is in his red eye, murder in his green one. Algebra spills from his punctured breast, and he reviles me, saying, brother, fellow builder, how is it you treat us thus, when we are but unfolded leaves of thee? It is thy own selves that are trampled here into this dark, into this worldly muck. The words he speaks are true. I raise my naked foot and plant it square against him. I push his gory weight along my spear's slick length, kick him from its powdered blue end to plummet, howling, into stars and calendars and money, into form and passion and regret. Around me in this slaughter firmament, this massacre of clouds, our painful war rages forever, and the maimed jinns are like locusts, raining on parched fields where we have sown a universe. And so, in his story, the war, that act of pushing the demons down, is in fact generating this level of reality.
Yeah.
The actual battle, and they're forced down, and that this reality is made up of separating good and evil and creating the two polarities, and that's where absolutely everything comes from.
Yeah.
And then I find when you look at it from that perspective, it's like it's a rough ride for the people we look down on. And especially our modern culture, we love it lately when somebody does anything that's wrong, even like something tiny, some new rule. We love piling on people, or the way stuff will go viral and then calling to get people fired over jokes even. But but also the way we love it when we find out someone, truly is horrible, because then it's free reign to put them fucking down.
Right, yeah.
Free reign to be so much better than them. But perhaps the demons have a really shitty, rep here. Like,
Yeah.
they're making, in a way, as big a sacrifice as the
Right.
victims of evil to be stuck playing that role for a time. Because also, I think the only way back from all that shit involves, a fair amount of lessons learned.
Right.
Which, yeah, is another theme of the book, is also that justice be above the streets.
Mm-hmm.
That there is not, like Peterson says, you don't get away with anything at all.
Right.
Although rather than it being so much a judgmental God, it's that the way the afterlife works basically is we sort ourselves into whatever torture we feel we deserve. That by our nature, we punish ourselves until we've learned our lessons.
Right. There's a couple of things that I thought that were really interesting about the passage that you said, or that you brought up. So the first was that as the demon was getting pushed down, you said like algebra came out of his mouth, and then also as the demon was pushed down, I think you said it, into like money and passions, etc. But I think it was really interesting that included in all that was form, which that one really surprised me, because I think it suggests, as you said, that the reality as we know it was created by that division.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the things he falls into, it's send him plummeting, howling into stars and calendars and money, into form and passion and regret. Yeah. And it's, and the one cut, coughing up a blood of logarithms.
Yeah.
And the algebra spills from his punctured breast. That he himself, that the demons in this book, they are active agents, yet they also make up the structure of reality.
Yeah.
And in fact, the most fundamental aspect of reality, like sort of the time-space continuum, that's Lucifer's body. And so, like Asmodeus, he's algebra, and he's certain aspects of reality. But the actual, the biggest demon of all is just he's everywhere.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I guess I got to add that to my reading list.
This book is, just ridiculously powerful.
Yeah.
Also, I think something Alan Watts, maybe I'm remembering the wrong person. I think it was Alan Watts said once that sort of, well, you can assume that this is all meaningless, or you can assume it's meaningful in a way you enjoy. And if you're going to play the game, if you're not going to kill yourself, if you're going to play, and if it is up to you to decide whether it's meaningful or not, you might as well just decide it's meaningful.
Sure.
You might as well just decide it's a good game. Anyone who's playing a game who's decided it's not a good game ruins the game. They can't enjoy it. If you're going to play a game, decide that that's a good game. Like, try to play Dungeons and Dragons with somebody who thinks the game is stupid and is doing it just to they absolutely destroy it. Or I find especially because with my little kids, I've always enjoyed toddlers. All you need to do to get along with a toddler is take their game seriously, no matter what it is. Even if you pick up a stick, put down a stick. Pick up a stick, hand an envelope back and forth. Just treat it like a good game.
Yeah.
And it becomes a good game. It's amazing what can be enjoyable with a 3-year-old, just because you both decided that this is fun. So even though, in no way is it objectively fun to just sit tossing stones or whatever, it can be the best time. Yeah. If you're not going to kill yourself, you might as well decide, fuck it, there's a good game to be played here, and figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Also, because we have a tendency you're more likely to find what you look for.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure.
And yeah, if I was motivated to, I think I could be just as eloquent about tearing reality apart, to tell you the truth. Like, I can see that side of it fully, and I'm never even going to argue that this makes more logical sense.
Right,
I
right.
just as intricate an argument about why we're each out just for ourselves and the opposite of everything. I'm not going to do it because I think it's counterproductive. And again, it's one of those things where it's paralogical. It's like, I think both. That yes, it's kind of a choice whether good or which you want to follow, good or evil. But then also it's entirely true that you should definitely be picking good.
Yeah.
Paralogically, it's also, fuck yeah, evil's supposed to be there, although you don't want the conversation to get to where somebody then feels entitled to commit evil. Like,
right.
Well, it's all a part of anything anyway, and
yeah.
because somehow, even though that's true, that it's all a necessary part of everything, it's still wrong to intentionally do it. And I think that's built into reality, though, is the other thing. Yeah. That's another way suffering is like a guardrail. Reality pushes back. That you do decide, fuck it, I'm going to take the evil path. You can logically hold on to that for a long time, but you're going to end up in a very, very, very bad place. Very, very, very fucking miserable. I think that's just like a law of reality built into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, you can choose to do that. And yes, that's part of all of this. And I'm sure whoever, like the people who do go way down those evil roads, I do believe this all works out for a reason. And yeah, I don't want to play that part any more than I have accidentally of going down the road. Because it's amazing how differently you can feel in ways people can't understand. Like, I find some of these experiences are as powerful or more powerful than any drug. Like, it's amazingly intense, the experiences you can have. And I think many, many, many people never have experiences like that unless it's their drinking or their those intense euphoric rushes on a roller coaster.
Right. Yeah.
Or the high of winning, you know those intense moments.
Yeah.
You feel super high. People get those, but a lot of people really aren't aware of what you can do, of that weird fucking inside world that is so fucking real.
Yeah. And I think it's what's really interesting is despite Sam Harris's history of drug use, he at least in his book Waking Up, when I read it, I think I remember him saying something like, any experience that you can have on drugs, you can also have without drugs if you know how to get to it.
I believe it.
Because at least from his perspective, you're just manipulating the sort of neurochemistry. And I haven't had much experience with drugs. And it was once I heard that, I was like, it maybe took a while to sort of fully sink in, but I had sort of decided that trying to get a hold of like some psychedelics or something was maybe not the best way of approaching these things, and I should at least see if I could try and generate these experiences without it first.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say you can. Okay, I bet you can duplicate any state with drugs.
Sure.
Like without. In my own experience, it's not that I can actually quite duplicate the effect of mushrooms.
Sure.
There's a different quality.
Yeah, I guess I should say you can have experiences at least as meaningful.
At least as intense.
Sure. Yeah.
And in fact, for me, if not more, because in my group of experiences, there's full-blown psychosis. Now, at that point, it's not under my control. I'm not although I could intentionally do that. Yeah, like without drugs, with fasting, sleeping, and other things that I could do, I'm aware I could do, I could push myself into total psychosis, and that will be more intense than mushrooms. You can try, it's like going to another world. It's like the best VR because it's just your brain doing it.
Right, yeah.
But even not going that far. And for me, I do feel, so I don't know how, because like it seems you've matched certain experiences, but I've also got experiences where, especially when I'm using like the magic mindset, where I can really push myself. It feels to me like I'm using the psychosis intentionally, to be honest.
Okay.
Like my imagination, it's like I bring up a controllable amount of the psychosis and I can really alter my reality so that I can have a ritual and be interacting with things and like I fucking feel, I sense things. And I can get myself where it's not that I actually see it, like it's a visual hallucination. But you know the way when you close your eyes and really focus, you can really see something? I can like achieve that eyes open. So I'm aware it's my imagination. Like I'm aware it's not the optic nerves.
Right.
Yet I kind of see it like, it's strange. And I can get into really powerful altered states of consciousness like that. That while not being like mushroom, well, in some ways was like the hallucinogenics and yet had other flavors entirely of its own. So yeah, the mind can definitely do all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't had any experiences like that. But that's really interesting that what you said about how you can interact with the psychosis in that way. And it seems like you can only do that because of how much work you've put into learning how to control and understand it. Whereas I think, like most people who haven't learned that definitely can't interact with it in that way, at least safely.
Yeah, and I found like the way I fell into doing this, it's really like the bipolar itself or life itself took over and ran me through these steps where I sort of, like a lot of the old magic traditions or like secret wisdom schools and stuff would have things where you have to practice, a certain amount of time alone first. You have to live properly in the community for 5 years. You have to, take these vows and stuff and have done it for years before beginning in. And for me, my first few years of taking bipolar seriously was 100% trying to put the brakes on. Whatever did come up, I was trying to learn to manage, but I was never encouraging it. It was always full brakes. And I found I wasn't interested in like magic at that point, but I was interested in the philosophy, the gnosis, the spiritual, and I was very interested in all those rules that the magic traditions had for preparing yourself. And I lived that way for years and years, and it was a full 7 years of having my psychosis under control enough that I wasn't in a mental institution before I started into doing actual magic. So yeah, if somebody was initially schizophrenic or bipolar, my advice would be to do like the wisdom traditions that took magic seriously, and before beginning to practice magic, start with honesty, learning meditation, mindfulness, sort your morals out, work on your thoughts about, and also why you're going to magic. Because magic to me is like, synchronicity and all the things you've experienced, even how much your reality can be changed. Just by your mindset. And how much actual synchronicity can happen. When you get involved in magic, you turn both those things way the fuck up. Like, whatever goes on inside your mind massively changes your experience of the world. I can witness that heaven anywhere much more easily than I could before. And also all the synchronicity gets turned way the fuck up. And I think it's also kind of like the Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility. And the way, even with crime, if you run in and rob a corner store and you just grab money and run out, or you go in with a gun, it's a big fucking difference how much trouble you're in for doing something wrong. whether you're carrying a gun or not. And if you get involved in magic, I think the angels and the demons and all that shit, it's like, okay, you've got a weapon while you're operating. The standard for behavior is higher. Like if someone's got a gun in public, our standard for behavior is much higher. That person can't be drunk. That person can't start yelling and screaming in public and have to ignore them. You know, there's a higher standard for what you do. And if you do something wrong, you're in more trouble. So I do think magic comes with that.
Yeah.
And the three big things, Alan Moore likes to point this out, and I think he says it perfectly. The three big things that most people who just go straight to magic, like they're wanting a result, it's not. And for me, the biggest part of magic is seeking connection to the higher self.
Sure.
It's not about getting things, and it's not about doing things in the world. In fact, even with this channel, I'm not pushing anything on anyone. I didn't decide to start doing a channel. And I'm only doing you because you want me to. If you didn't want to hear any of this, I would back off so quickly. Like, that's no problem. But most people go to magic looking either for money, sex, or power over others. It's not power over themselves. I want to be able to make other people do what I want. Or I want sex or I want money. And that's so fucking dangerous. That's where you get all the stories like the monkey's paw, where you just regret every wish.
Right.
Those wishes are built. Wanting power over someone else to me is an instant backfire. Like, whereas what's really powerful is instead going to magic for power over yourself, not others. I want to control my experience. And especially if it's, I want to control myself and be able to act good, like the capital G good.
Right.
I want to be honest. I want to control that. I want to control my emotions, not just so it's more pleasant. In fact, even if I'm going to have a bad emotion, I want to be able to control myself and not become spiteful, fucking passive aggressive with people or actively doing evil things. I find that takes you down the right path.
I think at some point I would be interested in learning more about magic, at least from the philosophical standpoint. But right now I'm gonna focus on learning more about this Orthodox tradition and maybe the mystical tradition that's part of it, just to see where it goes.
I think that's fantastic, and to practice the being honest for long enough that it doesn't feel new anymore. You know, like even like the neuroscience books say, you know, new thoughts, new pathways take time in the brain. And at first, I find also that's with mindfulness as well. Like when I was early working on it, I was constantly having to remind myself. I find now more often than not, I'm mindful. I think that's my more natural state. I've done it so long. I'm generally aware of what I'm thinking. I'm generally aware that that's not me. And I'm not always necessarily controlling the experience and improving it. Like I've got lots of depressed time, but I'm aware I'm depressed. And I don't connect to the thoughts, and I don't, and I create that larger space and can often be very content simultaneously. But it took a lot of years of work to get that skill. Which, unlike a lot of other skills, is hard to show anyone. Like most things you work on for years, an instrument, an art form of any kind, or just if you were carving wood for that many years, you'd have a lot of something to show someone. Whereas I've done years and years of work that you can't possibly show anyone. There's nothing there to show yet. To me, it's incredibly real. It's a real part of my experience right now. Other people can't see it and won't understand it if they haven't experienced it.
Sure.
And so aside from, and for me actually, I found all the active rituals and stuff were more important at the beginning. And more that is less important to me, and more it's about, and like for a lot of magicians will have a very normal life, and then they've got this quiet practice, and it's very isolated. Like the idea of creating the circle is to connect to a different world. And like to shift into a different dimension of reality where you're interacting. I have the freedom to just allow that to bleed into my everyday life. I don't have any persona I have to put on. So for me, it has bled. I have to do less and less ritual. Also, I have to do less and less meditation to be more mindful all the time. But for me, I'm constantly talking to everything like there's an aspect of consciousness to it.
Right.
Tons of time to think. And yeah, I'm thinking magically often about just the smallest things. And I'm constantly in a dialogue with synchronicity and my angels. Like, that's how I go through my days. Is just constantly interacting with that.
Yeah. That's I guess that's kind of my impression about how, from what I've heard anyways, about how being regular or diligent about daily, I guess, prayer for a Christian works. It's like the more you get into it, the more the mindset that the prayer puts you in lasts throughout the day. The easier it is to drop back into the mindset that the prayer is supposed to put you in.
Absolutely. And people with really good faith in their church, like, so, and even the kind of person who wouldn't be interested in a lot of what I say, you know what I mean? They're strictly Christian, but if you can get that the right way, they're walking around a lot of the time experiencing at least a bit of that heaven on earth that you saw. And they're constantly, they always feel like God's watching. Even when they're alone, they're not just acting Christian when other people can see.
Right.
It's constant. And they've got somebody to say goodnight to.
Right.
Somebody to say good morning to the minute they open their eyes. And different people will connect with God in different ways. Sure. Like, for some Christians, their gardening that's an interaction with God the whole time. There's a whole magical element to all of the church as well.
Yeah.
And it's ritual and a certain state of belief, and the good religion, it's an interaction directly with God. Now, there's two kinds. There's the kind of religion where they say you can't talk to God, only the priest can. The priest tell you what to do. And then there's the kind of religion that encourages you to pray and then listen, and encourages you to connect directly to God. And that just, the more often you do it, well, it's like anything. You do it often enough, and eventually you do it without thinking. The way driving, so much thinking at first.
Yeah, for sure.
You press and you remind, and now you can drive without even noticing you're driving.
Yeah.
And also, the repetitious prayers, the same thing with rituals. It's about getting certain ideas hammered into your head so that as you're going through your day, suddenly that symbol or that a line from a prayer jumps into your mind and reminds you of all these other things you were supposed to think about.
Yeah.
The repetition of anything makes it pop up in your head later. Whereas without all that prayer, you could read about it once, fully understand the idea, but then you just get caught up in your day, and it's like the way Sam says, thoughts kind of just appear. It's strange. We feel like we're kind of controlling them, but in another way, we're not. Like, even as I speak to you, I don't know where each word is coming from before it just pops up. I don't know where the fuck it's coming from. And our thoughts are that way. And we'll have horrible thoughts that just pop out of nowhere. You'll just, like Peter said, he imagined stabbing a student in front of him with his pen. It's not he thought, I want to think that. But you can just spontaneously think the most horrible thing. It'll come out of nowhere. The things that are repeated to you all the time just pop up into your head all the time. So once you notice that, hey, I don't pick what the fuck jumps into my head, you also notice, so there's things I can do that make it more likely certain things do jump into my head. So if I pray on a regular basis, especially whatever prayers you're choosing, you're increasing the chance you're going to have those thoughts later. It's kind of like filling a dark room with things that you know are going to pop out randomly. Things we think get stored somewhere and pop back up later. And so it's like intentionally putting something in there So it's more likely that it pops up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. You're having such a good experience with all that. And so your sort of your older group of friends, have you been talking to them at all? Like, have you told them you're going to the church or any of these things?
Yeah, I've told some of them. So because it's summer break, a lot of my friends are like from school and stuff are traveling, so I haven't really seen them. But yeah, some of the other people I know who have been around, I've told about this, and not many, but a few of them, and they, one of them is a pretty close friend of mine, and I get lunch with him once in a while, and we talk about some of these deeper things, and he was telling me that it's really interesting how it seems that I'm always really intently focused on working on these kinds of things, and that, like, he also said that he could see that I was making progress, even though I hadn't necessarily told him about it, just like in the way that I was interacting with him and other people in social situations and stuff like that. He could see that there was some difference that was manifesting itself.
It comes across everywhere. It's in your body language, it's in your facial expressions, and it's in that fucking weird energy people pick up off each other. Yeah. Beaming out a great energy, and it shows everywhere. Yeah. I can see it in the body language.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been going for probably almost 2 hours or so. And yeah, I should probably get going so I can take a shower and go to bed.
Yeah, I should go make something to eat. I haven't eaten yet today.
Yeah.
But that's always how I do it. I just eat one giant meal at the end of my day every day.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't like to eat until I have everything done that I have to do.
Yeah.
All right. So it was great talking to you. That's fantastic. Okay, wait. One last thing. Is there anything you're going to work on coming up? Like, what's your goal from here forward? Just to basically stick with this routine?
Yeah. I think to just to, I guess, get in the groove of living this way, making it more familiar and more natural, I guess. But also just think about more, continue pursuing this question of God, and then also other questions about like things that you might list on like a future authoring program or something like that, because these are other questions that I haven't really been able to answer. But I think just figuring out what I want out of life in the future is something that I want to start working on as well.
Okay, that's awesome. And I think it's so great you've made this change over these past couple months, because you're like a new person that settle into this routine, find the groove of this new, better person, and let this person take a look forward.
Yeah.
I hope you come on again at some point to let everyone know what it's been like to keep going for a couple more months.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so keep in contact, and I'm looking forward to hearing how this continues for you.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation.
Absolutely.
It's really great.
No, you too. Thanks for taking the time to come on. This is fantastic. And I couldn't be happier about how things are going for you. And thank you so much for wanting to do these recorded, because I think this is going to be awesome for people to see that you've made this progress.
Yeah.
All right. So I hope you have a great night, and keep in touch.
Yeah. You too.